Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us here at Morning at NTV. I am standing in for Joel Sonyani and the rest of the team that usually does this show. Today is Women's Day, and I'll keep reminding you for as much as I have the airtime to remind you. And I'm hoping all the women out there are celebrated. If you're not, go and celebrate yourself in one way or the other. Let's not leave it to other people to do the things for us that we want to do. So on the big story today, we are looking at the theme for International Women's Day. We are pressing for progress. And I'm joined in the studio by two ladies. I'll start with Masi Odu, who is sitting right next to me. She's a senior associate at Bowman AF Mpanga Advocates. Welcome, Masi.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for having us here.
Okay. And then, of course, we have Ruth Sebatinira, who is a partner at Legomac Advocates. I will also add that she is the former ULS president. I'm just going to add it because I must. Thank you both for joining us. Today we are talking about Press for Progress, and we're talking women, all issues. And but before we start with that conversation, I'd like to ask you both from where you stand, what are you most thankful for about the journey that women have walked?
Well, for us in the legal fraternity as women, we can easily say that there's been great strides that have been made in the positive direction insofar as giving female lawyers the space and the platform to compete fairly and also to partake of the industry. And so I am personally grateful for the fact that we even have a platform to begin with. And that we can, despite the limitations and the barriers and the obstacles, that we can still, use that space and still make a mark in any way that we can. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, there is a lot to be thankful for. But I think the one thing we should be thankful for is the fact that we have a voice, the fact that we can speak. I think there are many women that are in spaces that can hardly speak. And so for those of us that can raise awareness to the issues, that can bring the issues to the fore, that we should press for progress and also be very thankful for and utilize, not just as women lawyers, but women in the media, you have a voice, you have a platform. So those spaces we should be thankful for, but not just feel thankful, but really maximize and really push the women's agenda forward.
What are those places where you shake your head and say, we're still not there, we need to do better here as women? Well,
we all know the issues that, if I could speak about the workplace issues, the inequality, the wage gap, that is real. It's not just an American issue or European issue, that is real. Even in law firm settings, you walk into a law firm, you are both classmates with a guy, and for some reason the guy will be given a different salary, as a lady will be given a different salary at the very beginning. Should we say that women negotiate for less? That's another one. But you're both from school, you're both fresh, you both probably had a better degree, maybe you have a first class degree, the guy has a lower class, but those things are real. And then couple it with a lady going for maternity leave, when you get back things are worse. You'll be given a dingier office, you'll be given less satisfying work or less fulfilling work. So those things are real, not just in law firms, but in many professional settings. Well, so that is where you get to shake your head.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned about, so you both come out of law school and you probably even have a better degree. I was reading an article that said that women just bargain for less, that they're ashamed to ask for their worth. Also mostly maybe because they don't really value themselves as much as they should. So they get in and they're afraid to say this amount of money, or even when they see they're looking under the table and the men say, no, we can only give you this much. And yet a man will walk in and give this absurd figure, and you know what? It goes.
Yeah, I've had that story, or I've seen that movie where they say women bargain for less. But I gave you a scenario, you're both from school. Okay, the boy had better negotiating skills, maybe, in the boardroom. But now take it to another level where we have more women that are doing non-paid work. Our maids, some of us don't pay our maids at home. Some women do a lot of work that is unpaid. And when you look at that gap, still it is an inequality gap in terms of earnings, that there will be more women that don't have any money in their wallet, in their bags, than the men, for whichever reason, maybe less bargaining power or whichever reason. But the fact remains that there is still that inequality gap in terms of wage and earnings. In fact, it is established as a fact that more women do work that is practically not paid for at all. Yes.
All right, Mercy?
Yeah, I mean, it is true, maybe sometimes true, that women do not value so much who they are, or do not appreciate their worth in these spaces, and so they will walk in not really appreciating that they're able to bring anything onto the table that will warrant them, or that will justify them to ask for whatever wage it is, if it's talking comparatively against our male colleagues. So not knowing what you're worth, not knowing what you're bringing to the table, not knowing what, thinking that you're not good enough. There's a confidence issue, and that confidence issue does not just sprout out at the level of an interview or asking for a job. That confidence issue goes way, way back.
We're socialized that way.
Yeah, we're socialized in such a way. So it probably sticks into how we're brought up, and then we just go with it, which I think is wrong. We could do better.
Do you think, Ruth, you said something about how you gave the example of our maids, and you said some of us don't pay our maids. And for me, that brings me to the question of, do you think we are our own problem sometimes?
To an extent, yes. To an extent, yes. And that's why the awareness campaign should not just be, in the boardrooms. It has to go into the communities, into the villages, because we go to the villages and we tell our judges, hey, I need a girl to take to Kampala. Now, by the time that girl comes to Kampala, Law Society or any other, awareness campaign should have been to the communities to let people know of your right to be paid, when you go to Kampala to work. The awareness campaigns should never stop. They have to go on. And not just right to work, but speaking to the men in the communities about the women's rights. It's a whole big agenda that cannot remain in at the TVs or in boardrooms. It has to go out in the communities. Local governments have to be involved, civil society. But the awareness campaign, once people know that, when I go to Kampala to work, I must be paid. I must work for 8 hours. I have to sleep. There are maids who don't sleep, They will clean the whole day. Then when the kids come back, they're the ones to take care of the kids. Then they won't sleep. By 3, they are doing the juice. And, before you know it, there's a lot going on. And maybe it's 6 kids in their home. It's 1 maid. So it's sitting in boardrooms and talking about work-life balance is a bit elitist when we also don't think into what we are also doing now to other women that are in our space as well. So it has to be, a holistic approach to the issues. As I go to work, say for a bank, to press for my progress to become MD, I should not be pressing down on another person, in my own setting. Yeah.
Right.
But I think also to take on from what Ruth said and your question, I think sometimes you would expect that a fellow woman would empathize or would understand the women's plight even better. But then you will find that, like Ruth was explaining, if you can't treat your house help at home, your people outside in your community, and you come to the boardroom and you expect that people are going to give you that which you can't even give to another, I think it's hypocritical of us.
We're expecting
space.
Too much.
Yeah.
That we're not giving.
Yeah.
What does gender bias look like for the both of you? When we say gender bias, and because it's a big issue, that's I think one of the things that's brought about the Press for Progress campaign. What does it look like for you in the spaces that you've operated?
Well, I've already mentioned the space of the wage gap. That is for real. I've also mentioned the maternity issues, that when you go on to maternity leave, I think she doesn't know about that yet. But and those are real threats for women professionals. If I could go into the professional space, that now more women are thinking of taking longer, to start families because they know the repercussions.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the repercussions of getting or starting a family? And then if you don't now take it into the home setting, if you don't have a supportive spouse, who say, okay, or with whom you'll even have that conversation initially. Do you have common aspirations to say, as we start this family, maybe the first 2 years you'll take care of us, or maybe that negotiation in that space as a couple. So the biases are both in the workplace, but also even with our spouses. Some spouses don't know better. It may not be that they are oppressive in their ways, but probably they don't know better. They've grown up in different settings. They say, I know for a fact some couples that are both lawyers, both man and woman are lawyers, and the man will call the girl and say, it's 6 p.m. Why aren't you at home? I had better find you there. But you're both lawyers. You both attended the human rights class. You both know what is at stake.
You know the work.
Exactly. Exactly. You know how much I must put in also to progress the way you're progressing. You see, so and that is why at the Law Society we started the Female Lawyers Campaign Committee to talk about these issues, to tell the male employers, who are majority of the employers of women lawyers, really, to tell them that this equality thing cannot just remain, at the UN or wherever. It has to come here. You have daughters, you have sisters. This thing affects all of us. So the thing to do is and we've done that in the Law Society, to ask people to undertake certain things, the equal pay, remove discrimination, and sexual harassment is also a big issue. It's one thing that never really gets
talked about.
But now we are seeing it coming up with the Me Too campaigns, and even now women in Uganda are slowly beginning to speak out and say, well, thank you to social media for giving them that platform, because otherwise it's not something that they would have said.
Yeah. There is a lady once who shared with me from another jurisdiction, a lady lawyer. She was working for a law firm, and whenever they were going out of town, the male partner would book one room. And so, yes, and so at the reception, she goes to check in, say, my name is, no, you've been checked in with someone. So on 2 occasions, she said she slept at the reception because the guy had told her, no, we are going to sleep in one room. So those, and this is your boss. And between life and life, really, sometimes, we have different settings. You could be the firstborn in your family, the rest of your siblings are in school, your parents are both dead, you're the one. It's a really difficult situation, and you maybe must be the one to...
And you can't afford to just walk away.
To walk away, exactly. So those are the issues. So what informs that gender bias is these are cultural issues that she has already spoken about, and a lack of awareness, a lack of awareness of the need now to address these issues urgently more than ever, because we can't press for progress if these small improvements are made only in our households. That your husband is good to you, that is not good enough. We need 1,000 more husbands who are good to their wives, who are supportive of their wives, and then replicate that in communities. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about pressing for progress. What is a woman's role in all of this? How do we begin to help ourselves? Because we are constantly calling for people to help us. But how do we help ourselves? Because we're the ones pushing now.
I mean, I think at a point such as this, women have to come to a place where they should just stop whining.
But is it really whining, first of all?
Not whining in the sense that, oh, poor us, look at us, but really come to a point that this has to stop. Yeah, we are equally capable, we are equally as good. If we sit down and do nothing, then we're not going to move anywhere. And now, in a place and a time such as this, where we have, like you mentioned, fora, there's the social media, there is press, there's all these platforms that you could use. I think it's time that we started discussing, and it is what we're discussing, started discussing actual solutions rather than sit down and cry about our problems, but to actually come together and get practical, workable ways to get out of these spaces, to get out of spaces where we're discriminated against, to get out of spaces to get out of the quietness of sexual harassment, to get out of the fear of being.
Where is safety in speaking about things? But before we even answer that, when we're looking at solutions, I remember there's a group of women who, in the rural areas, who went naked, fighting for their land. But how far did that get them? Is it the approaches that we take to get our voices heard? Is there a problem with them? What can we do?
Because you said, what can we do as women without that we're always seeking, the help of others, and we need it. Truth be told, if it is true that 50% of the population is men, 50% is women, whichever way you look at it, if you just deal with 50%, you still have only 50% of the result. So my view then is that you need the support, of each other, not just in the family setting, because you have a husband, a father, brothers. So that for me, the engagement has to be not just with women, but with all of us. But speaking now specifically about the question that you asked, what can we do as women? At an individual level, there are about three things, I think. Getting an education is a must for a woman, for a girl. Education is so empowering, whatever you choose to study. For me, I think that is one basic thing. Now, you might be a farmer, you're too old. Maybe now your education needs are different. Maybe you need to be educated in farming skills or some economic empowerment lessons. But education in whichever field I think is key. And then that leads to financial independence, because without financial independence, your voice can be a bit limited. It helps when you have a bit of resources to make noise. You don't have to lose your dignity to undress. Maybe you would express yourself differently if you had a bit of financial redress or independence. And then the other one that I think is critical is then the networks that we must build as women. Now you're educated, you have some money, but then how do you create a multiplier effect? I should look for you, we should look for other women, and the women in the cities should come out of their cities, go to the next municipals into villages, like that.
And not just on Christmas.
Exactly, and not even just on Women's Day.
Yeah.
This has to be a continuing agenda.
I think the other thing, taking from what Ruth has said, is being bold enough to have this conversation with fellow women, but also with the men across the table, because we are part of the problem, they are part of the problem, and that makes us all part of the solution. So if we do not have these conversations, then we're not taking any steps towards anything. Then we have to have conversations, uncomfortable as they might seem, but they're very critical to breaking barriers, to changing mindsets. Mindsets will not be changed by miracles. Mindsets have to be tackled by continuous conversation.
Okay.
Across the board.
I was doing a little reading yesterday, and I found that there's a recent report by the World Economic Forum's 2017 Global Gender Gap Report. The gender gap will most likely take over 200 years to close, 217 years to be exact. So to close it will about 200 years.
I mean, that shouldn't be bad news. It looks like 200 years, but look at the journey to 2018.
To now.
I mean, the women empowerment movement is as old as maybe 1990s or 19, whatever it is. So from 1911 to 2018, great strides, great achievements have been made. So to think of 200 as a number that will never come. In fact, for me, I look at it as, if we even have a number, even the better. If that number were anything close to accurate, then you're thinking, okay, 200 years, that's fine. We can work double hard or triple hard to make that number either 100 or 150. I mean, at least it's there. We see something. And so you can make whatever initiatives or whatever advocacy you have to do, anything you have to do with an end that is visible, it should be good news rather than disheartening or discouraging.
Look, I have a different view. For me, there is a sense of urgency to these issues, because you're dealing with poverty, The world's poorest are women, So should it take us 200 years to come out of poverty? So
it shouldn't.
That one, for me, there is a real sense of urgency. I think as a country we have a vision 2040, and I think at the international level, the Sustainable Development Goals agenda is at by 2050 we should have closed the gender gap. So even if it...
But when we are told 200 years...
Yeah, but at least there are some mid-term targets.
Yeah, then you can set targets along
met,
the way.
To be met. But I don't think we should be waiting for 200 years to get out of abject poverty.
Yeah.
You see, the sense of urgency has to be
impressed.
Yeah, it has to be impressed. It has to be pressed. You know, so that we don't have to wait for 200 years. I should imagine that from the World Economic Forum, they said it would take 200 years, but I think they came up with strategies to make sure it does not take
as much time.
Hence the campaigns that they're running now. But from where you're seated, what is our pressing need? When you look around and you're thinking, this is how far we've come, this is where we are right now, this is what we must be doing now.
We should by now have removed the discrimination. We should by now not be having violence, you know, gender-based violence, because, you know, and I think the real underlying issue is poverty. I have to keep talking about poverty, because with poverty, that's when people are too stressed, they are fighting, you know.
Yeah.
When you're not too poor, you're busy, you know, the devil's mind is
an idle mind.
Workshop.
An
idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Ah, fantastic. So that when you're busy working, there's no time to fight. There is no time to beat up another human being, you know. So I think the real issues we have are caused by that level of poverty. Now, deal with poverty, deal with remove of discrimination, and deal with sexual harassment. I think there you'd have dealt with some of the most pressing issues. The most pressing issue is for our women to be empowered, and you empower women by educating them. Hence, they get money in their handbags and be able to go to town to buy a piece of cloth for themselves and their children and take them to school and be able to take care of their health needs. It's really an empowerment issue for me.
You know, while I agree with Ruth, I just want for us to, you know, sort of draw a line between, I mean, there is women who have had an education, who have had some bit of empowerment, but for all intents and purposes have, you know, they're aware of their rights, but then there is the other divide, which is not aware of their rights. They do not know what they're entitled to. They are not empowered. They are poor. They're voiceless, basically. So what do we need to do? What's most critical? I think what's most critical will really depend on which side of the divide we fall. For the women that are suffering abject poverty, constantly being ill-treated, there is domestic violence, they can't speak out for themselves, they're poor, they can't even walk out of abusive families and abusive homes. I think the need on that side of the divide is more knowledge impartment, more
education,
awareness, more education of people's rights, and maybe even more projects to help people come out, women especially, come out of
inclusion.
A poverty-stricken kind of life, and see how they can get out into a place where they can speak of financial independence. So I think it will depend on what side of the divide you fall to find out what's most critical.
Although the majority still are the ones, you know, that are living in abject poverty.
Yeah. So,
do you think the conversations that we are having now on a lot of our platforms, and I know the patriarchy, feminism, this is now the conversation for most of the elite, do you think these are helping the cause?
I think they are, because for you to help another person, you must first be okay yourself. Yeah. So if I'm a lawyer and being discriminated in my own space, I need to fight that. You will not be able to wake up to go to fight for another person when you're sad yourself. So you need to improve your own space as well. You need to work on your own barriers. You know, are you not negotiating enough? Are you not giving a voice? Do you have a leadership platform? Are women leaders in your law firm? Do you see women partners in your law firm? Are there women MDs in the media space? Those things have to, you know, we have to keep pressing for those things, because it's those that are going to be okay that will help others to get okay. So it's true, like Shah said, that you need, for every space, you need to keep making the improvements that are required. And so yes, social media, for me, I think whatever works needs to be used.
Yeah, I think, it makes a lot of sense. And really for the people who have the platform, for those who have the voice, for the people who, you know, who have all this platform to use it for the benefit of those that might not have. It's very critical that those who have the influence and can help a hand and can extend in whatever way, it's very critical that, you know, they use that to spread out and make a difference in whatever sphere of influence they have, from a home unit to a workspace to a political space to a press space. MPs. It will take everything. Yeah, it will take everything to.
Well, so we're winding up. We're just about done, but I'd like to get final remarks from you. I think one of the things that I want to see more this year is women actually getting up and doing things more than sitting down and having conversations in comfortable spaces like this one, but getting up and actually putting, you know, their feet in places and their hands and getting to work. What would you like to see going forward as we press for progress? What is your call?
You know, I think I would like to see more women stepping up from their comfort zones, and because mainly women who have the space and the ability are comfortable just in their space and ability and not want that, you know, that comfort to be disorganized, to be tampered with, and yet a hand and a hand, you know, 2 hands, 3 hands, it goes a long way in making a change. So it would be very important that the discussion gets out. We don't have this discussion just on the 8th of March, but push this discussion days after 8th of March and have it very aggressively and reach out to one person reaching out to another and seeing how you can make a difference. People look empowered in their suits and in their boardrooms and all, but in fact, it's different.
You don't know what's happening at home.
The mindset is as poor as the lady back in the village with nothing to eat. So mindsets need to be addressed, personal mindsets, and then try to address the mindsets around us with mindsets that are as, you know, focused on creating a difference. I think we can all use our spaces for the benefit of a woman that has no voice whatsoever.
All right. Ruth?
Well, it sounds like, you know, that would be the same call I make. Maybe to just add that probably we need to see a leadership campaign for women. We need to see more women leaders. Now, once we create more women leaders, and in that space, you want to create forums that go into communities. Yeah. I think we need to see these things go out of the cities, out of Kampala, out of Wakiso, and even, you know, greater parts of Wakiso, you cannot think that they are really that developed. But we need to go into the communities. And I think I like what Enterprise Uganda does. Enterprise Uganda will go to Kulu and get 1,000 people in a hall and talk to them about how to start a business. Now, that kind of thing
would practical.
Yeah, it's practical. Now, get 1,000 women in some space and teach them about agricultural skills and teach them about the computer, you know. Exactly. And teach them how to access some resources, how to empower themselves, how to read. You know, can we do numbers? I think this game will make a lot more sense when we are now using numbers. Can we put women together, 2,000 women in the West in some place and say, for a week, what can we do? You know, as whether Law Society or FIDA or UN Women, but the game will change only with numbers.
Okay.
But that requires also good leaders, the leaders that we bring along.
I was going to say include the good, because we've had women leaders and people constantly say this and they get to the top and forget that there's a whole lot of people waiting on them to lead.
My call for action would include men.
The
men, we need to be on this journey with the men. We can't just, you know, sit with 1,000 women without men. You know, the men need to tell us what they've done so well over the last, 1,000 years, so that when we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Because men also look at us and know that, this thing is not going to work.
Yeah.
And they just keep quiet because we've not involved them. So we need to bring the men along.
Yeah, but maybe very final. I think there is nothing that will be discussed on this day that has not been discussed before. There's no proposal, there is no solution that has not been offered, that has not been done before. But what will make a difference is actually, like Ruth said, actually walking the talk and not just glossing it over with we have to just walk the talk, and it takes you getting off your seat and going out there.
It's the implementation of what will be the same.
Action. Okay. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for joining me this morning. I know I took you out of your comfortable spaces on a public holiday, but there was no traffic, so thank you very much for coming here to join me. And that was our big story. Coming up is Everyday Life with Caro.
You're watching Morning at